Hello everyone, and welcome to day 1.1. Today we're going to be going over a crafting overview for the Elder Scrolls Online. First things first, there's two types of crafting in the Elder Scrolls Online. There is equipment crafting and consumable crafting. The first type of crafting I want to go over is the equipment crafting, which is why I've come to this blacksmithing station here. I'm going to be showcasing the blacksmithing interface and the blacksmithing skill line. It's important to note that between blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking, the three equipment crafting skill lines in the base game, they are all very similar, and the same principles that are going to apply to the blacksmithing station will apply to clothing and woodworking. So first things first, let's get into the skill line. And I'll be doing a little bit of back and forth going between the skill line and the crafting interface, basically highlighting what skills within the skill line affect within the crafting interface. So first things first, we have our metalworking passive here. So metalworking affects the quality of material that you can use when crafting gear, and the quality of material affects the level of the items that you can produce. So here allows the use of iron ingots. If I go into the crafting interface and go to creation, you'll see here that I can use iron ingots right now, and I can't use steel ingots, and it even says requires metalworking too. If I go into my passives, take level 2 of metalworking, and go back into the crafting interface, now I can use steel ingots. As you can see, iron ingots is levels 1 through 14, steel ingots levels 16 through 24. Whenever you're going to make an item within this interface, you're going to need to select what item you want to make, the material, so in this case I could use either iron ingots or steel ingots depending on the level, a style material, which in my case, my character is a Breton, so I would have started with the Breton style already unlocked, and then you can find crafting motifs around the world that will allow you to unlock other styles and the ability to use other style materials. So, for instance, Nord, I actually have an extra Nord crafting motif on my character. It's already in my library, so I can't use this one, but this is what you would look for in order to use on your character to unlock new styles. Alright, lastly, we have the trait. So in order to use a particular trait on an item, you have to research it first, and then you need to have that particular trait item available to you in order to use it. So I don't have any traits researched for one-handed axe, but for cuirass, I do have traits researched, so I can make impenetrable or reinforced cuirasses. There's another advantage, and in order to research traits, you would go into this research screen. If you had a piece of gear on your character or in your bank that had a trait you hadn't researched, you would be able to select it down here. And when you research that item, it will destroy the item. And so don't research your really valuable gear. Try and find gear as you traverse and quest throughout the land that has traits that you haven't researched yet. And those will be great for bringing back here and researching. Now, so in the creation screen, I can make either impenetrable and reinforced, but there's another advantage to researching your traits. As you can see, this blacksmithing station is a Death's Wind blacksmithing station. It's found in this location in Glenumbra, and you'll find these icons, these crafting icons, all across the map. At these areas, there'll be specific sets that you can create. So in this case, it would be Death's Wind, which has, as seen here, these set bonuses. Now, the thing to note is Death's Wind is a set that requires you to have 2 traits researched for any particular item that you want to craft there. So, since I have 2 traits researched for cuirass, I could make a cuirass. But I don't have any traits researched for sabatons, and so I can't create sabatons at this crafting station. It matters a lot as later into the game there's craftable sets that will require a lot of traits researched that are very powerful. You'll want to be able to craft them as you get later into the game. So, next passive that we're looking at, Keen Eye. This allows you to see raw materials out in the wild around the world much easier. Miner Hireling. So this hireling will send you mail each day that will contain raw materials for blacksmith crafting. Metal Extraction. Metal Extraction affects the refining interface. So when you refine a material, you not only turn that raw material into, in this case, ingots, or a material that you can use for crafting, there is a chance that you will find tempers or other valuable resources during the refining process. Metal extraction increases the chances of this occurring, and personally, I don't advise doing any refining until you have metal extraction maxed out. Otherwise, you risk missing out on some of those valuable items that can be attained. Metallurgy affects research times. So the first tier reduces research times by 5% and allows the research of 2 items at once. Higher tiers will decrease the amount of time even further and allow researching of up to 3 items at once. The last rank will cap the most amount of time that a single research can take at 30 days, which is really valuable considering it can save you a lot of time. Next passive, Temper Expertise. So, I have a graphic that describes what temper expertise that I'm going to put up now. Essentially, what this graphic says is, in order to increase the quality of a particular item, you need a certain number of improvement items. So, if we come back to the game here, so here's our improvement screen. This Cuirass of Death's Wind is currently normal quality. If I wanted to improve it into fine quality, I would select it, and it would cost a certain number of honing stones. Then, after I used those honing stones to improve it to fine quality, I would need a certain number of dwarven oil to improve it to superior, a certain number of grain solvent to improve it to epic, and then a certain number of tempering alloys to improve it to legendary. These improvement items are going to be some of your most expensive items that you purchase in the game. And so what Temper Expertise does is it saves you money by decreasing the amount of tempers that you have to use in order to improve your items. It should be noted that you don't necessarily need to use the max amount of tempers, but if you do that, there is a chance that you will fail your improvement, and when you fail an improvement, not only do you lose the tempers, you'll lose the item, and you don't have any chance for salvaging any of that material. I don't recommend taking a chance when improving items, especially considering how much money can be invested prior to each improvement. So if you're trying to improve an item from epic to legendary, that item is already going to have quite a bit of material and improvement item cost sunk into it, and to have it be destroyed by a failed improvement is going to be, it'll leave a sour taste in your mouth. So, those are all of the passives in blacksmithing and what they do. Other things to cover within the crafting interface would be this diagrams tab, and all of the woodworking and clothing stations will also have this. This is where you would go to create items for housing, which I'm not going to get too involved in. Housing can be a very big money sink and time sink, and for a day one guide, it's a little bit out of our range. That's all I had to cover with gear crafting and equipment crafting. Let's move on to consumable crafting. So here we are back in Daggerfall at an alchemy station. I'm gonna do the opposite with the consumables crafting that I did with the equipment crafting, in which I'm gonna go over the crafting interface first and then talk about the skill line. So, in the alchemy crafting station, there's the creation tab and the formulae. The formulae is where you would make things for housing, similar to the diagrams tab that we saw in blacksmithing. The creation tab is where we will create potions. In order to create a potion, you need to select a solvent and 2 reagents. So in my case, I could select columbine and cornflower. And since I have already discovered the Restore Magicka trait on both of these reagents, it will allow me to create a sip of Magicka. Now, for 2 reagents that I haven't discovered any traits on, it will preview an inert potion. And if I were to try and create this potion, I'm not sure what result I would get. For the sake of the video, let's give it a shot. So, in this situation, I created an inert potion. I lost one of my natural waters, one of my blue antilomas, one of my blue blessed thistles, and I received nothing. This is kind of a big deal, especially as reagents get more expensive in the future. Combining reagents and testing things out isn't going to be my recommendation for how to determine what reagents have what properties. I would recommend looking online, finding a guide. If you do choose to do it that way, what I would recommend is that you start with your top reagent, try your second reagent. Second reagent doesn't work, try your third. Third doesn't work, try your fourth. You're going to need a lot of reagents to do it this way, but that will allow you to guarantee, okay, so I did everything with my first reagent, now let's do everything with my second reagent, and so on and so forth. That makes sure that you keep everything organized, so you don't ever have to go second reagent up to top reagent. You'll know that you've already covered that combination, doing it with that methodology. Like I said, that's going to be pretty tedious, and it's going to take a lot of materials. I recommend looking online, but if you don't want to spoil it, don't want to look at any reference material, that's fine. So, 2 reagents and a solvent makes a potion, as long as the 2 reagents have a trait in common. Looking at the skill line, solvent proficiency. This is very similar to our metalworking passive from blacksmithing. What solvent proficiency does is it allows us to use higher ranks of solvents. And so in this case, solvent proficiency 2 would allow me to use pristine water, which would allow me to make a higher level potion. And this goes up and up, and solvent proficiency affects essentially how strong your potions will be at the end of the day. Keen eye, same function as with blacksmithing, it'll allow you to see reagents from further away in the wild. Medicinal use. Now, medicinal use is a passive that is actually very strong and is worth taking even on a character that isn't a crafter. What medicinal use does is it increases the duration of buffs that you get from potions. And why this matters is because when you use certain potions without medicinal use, their buffs will actually expire before your potion cooldown has run its duration. What that means is your buffs will fall off towards the tail end of your potion cooldown. At max rank, your potion buffs will actually extend further than your potion cooldown, allowing you to have 100% uptime on your buffs. Very valuable passive. I recommend that all endgame min-max characters have this passive. Chemistry, very good passive. This is essentially the passive that saves you money in alchemy. So it produces 1 extra potion or 4 extra poisons per crafting attempt. What this means is instead of just getting 1 potion for every 1 solvent, 2 reagents, you will get 4 potions for every 1 solvent and 2 reagents, essentially quadrupling the value that you got out of that solvent and those reagents. Laboratory use. This is a very good passive as well, so it allows the use of up to 3 reagents while mixing potions or poisons. So in my case, I don't have laboratory use. I'm only able to select 2 reagents. If I had laboratory use, I would be able to select a third. So in this case, potentially blue Antoloma. And that would allow me to combine extra effects into my potions without, only the extra reagent being the cost of that. Alright. Last passive here is Snake Blood. This passive is irrelevant. I do not recommend taking this passive. It reduces the duration of negative effects in potions by 50% when consumed. We shouldn't be brewing potions that have negative effects, and so Snake Blood becomes irrelevant. If you never drink a potion with a negative effect, Snake Blood never has any effect on your gameplay. So I don't highly recommend Snake Blood, and I would avoid it on all of my characters. Alright, with alchemy covered, let's move on to enchanting. Alright, so we're at the crafting interface now. Looking in, we have creation. So in order to create a enchantment, you will need a potency runestone, an essence runestone, and an aspect runestone. The potency runestone is going to affect whether a enchantment has a additive or subtractive effect, as well as the level of the enchantment. So in this case, Jorah is used to make a level 1 enchantment, and Jorah, Mako, and Ta will create a trifling glyph of magicka. Something worth noting is that unlike alchemy, every time that you combine these 3 runestones, you will create an enchantment. There will never be a situation where your creation will fail, essentially taking away your materials for nothing. You will be successful in creating a glyph, but it may not be the glyph that you want. But it's a little bit less risk to experiment with. If you want to discover all of your essence runestones, the names of them, as well as the names of your potency runestones, it's going to cost you a lot less than the alchemy situation. I still recommend online guides to figure out how to make particular enchantments, but this should do should you decide to research each runestone. There's a bit less risk and a bit more consistency. So that's how you create a rune. Potency, essence, and aspect runestones combined. Potency runestones control the level. The essence runestones affect what type of glyph you're going to make. So since Mako is magicka, this will create a glyph of magicka. Oko being health creates a glyph of health. Denny is stamina. This would create a glyph of stamina. Those are important glyphs to know early on. Then your aspect runestones. These affect the quality of the runestone that you'll make. And so, let's see here. Right here, a trifling glyph of health will add 284 maximum health at normal quality. Then at fine quality, it will add 299 maximum health, essentially giving you a slight boost just for being a higher quality. And obviously it's going to go normal, fine, superior, epic, and then legendary quality. Extraction. Extraction is where you will go. This is where you can deconstruct armor glyphs. And from this screen you will be able to retrieve some materials from glyphs that you collect from throughout the world, or glyphs that you make yourself, as well as giving you a slight amount of enchanting experience. Alright. Now let's take a look at our passives. Aspect improvement. This affects the quality of aspect runestones that we can use. So my aspect improvement is level 1. If I go into the creation screen and I go down here, At level 2 I would be able to use a Donata. At level 3 I can use a Rakuda. And at level 4 I can use a Kuda. And that just improves the quality of glyphs that I can make. Potency improvement affects the level of potency runestones that I can use. So in my case, I would be able to use Yera, Jijota, Ode, and Tade potency runestones, and those runestones would be used to make higher level glyphs. Keen Eye works the same way as the alchemy and blacksmithing, allows you to see items out in the world easier. Hireling delivers mail to you each day with raw enchanting materials. Runestone Extraction, this is the deconstruction passive in enchanting, essentially the metal extraction of enchanting. It just increases your chance of finding runestones when deconstructing glyphs. Alright, with that being said, let's move on to provisioning. Alright, starting with the provisioning interface. Provisioning is a interesting one compared to the other crafting recipes, crafting skill lines. For provisioning, you will need to find recipes throughout the world that will allow you to cook particular foods. So every one of the dishes you're seeing here, I had to at some point find the recipe for. Once you have the recipe, you can go to any cooking fire, and that will allow you to craft food, drinks, and if you found recipes that can be made at cooking fires, you can create furnishings for your house from the interface as well. It is worth noting that chefs and brewers will sell some beginner recipes to get you started out, and having food buff is fairly important, makes your character quite a bit more capable in combat. Alright, with that interface covered, let's get into the passives. So recipe quality, this affects whether or not you can use green or blue or purple or legendary recipes when crafting. So in this case, if I had recipe quality, it would allow me to create these dishes here and all the other blue dishes. Recipe improvement affects the level of recipe that you can make. So higher level of recipe improvement, higher level / quality of recipes that you can make. Gourmand adds 5 minutes to the duration of any eaten food. Kinda nice. It's a convenient passive, not 100% necessary. I would only recommend taking this on a character that has just a surplus of skill points. Connoisseur does the same thing as Gourmand, except with drinks. Chef and Brewer are very similar passives, and they're very good passives to have on your specific crafter. Chef will create an extra food for every food that you craft. Brewer will create an extra drink for every drink that you craft, up to 4 each. So 4 food can be made per crafting attempt with Max Chef. 4 drinks can be made with Max Brewer for each brewing attempt. Hireling, same as the other skill lines. Hireling will send you mail with raw provisioning materials. Now that we've covered how the interface and skill lines work for each of the crafting skill lines, I would like to talk about how best to go about leveling each of the crafting skill lines. So, for blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking, the best way is to go into your deconstruction tree, and if you're collecting gear and other material as you move throughout an adventure, coming here and deconstructing that gear will give you a lot of experience in your blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking. The higher level and quality of the gear that you deconstruct, the more experience you will get. Enchanting is a pretty difficult skill to level up. I don't recommend creating a large amount of runes in order to level your enchanting. I recommend doing glyph extraction. Now this can take a very long time, unless you have a friend who is already a max level enchanter that can make you high level glyphs to deconstruct. This is the fastest way to do it. It will take a lot of materials and investment on your part, especially if you do not have a large stockpile of materials already. For provisioning, the best way to level provisioning is by spamming the creation of a large quantity of food and drinks. This is why it's recommended to make sure that you're picking up materials as you travel throughout Tamriel. And this is so that you will have a lot of materials on hand when you want to level your provisioning, so that you can just spam the highest level dish that you have, and then you would go into your provisioning skill line, go to the next level of recipe improvement, and then spam the next highest level. If you feel like you don't have a high enough level recipe to get an efficient amount of experience out of, you can always talk to chefs and brewers. The recipes that they sell will scale with your recipe improvement. In order to level alchemy, it's recommended to spam potions. You want to make sure that you're making as high of a level as possible, and then once you reach a high enough level, to take the next level of solvent proficiency and again make the next highest level that you can. This is the best way to level alchemy. It's going to take a lot of materials. Something that I would recommend is finding materials that you come across often, something like flesh fly larva, which you can get from killing zombies, and spider egg, which you can get by killing spiders. Using materials like these in combination with another material that you have widely available, that's going to be the cheapest and most effective way to level your alchemy. I would also make a recommendation to be using poison solvents. These are just easier to collect in general than your potion solvents. Alright. With all the skill lines and interfaces being covered, I want to move on and talk about crafting writs. As early game, this is the main thing that you will be using crafting for. I don't recommend making too many glyphs, doing too much cooking, or too much gear creation at a low level. First of all, it's going to be pretty difficult. You'll have to farm a lot of recipes, research a lot of traits in order to make effective equipment. And second of all, our goal is to be leveling, and we will quickly level out of whatever gear that we create. But with crafting writs, it's actually a very good way to make money. So here is where you would pick up your consumable crafting writs. It's a consumable crafting writs board. And then down here is an equipment crafting writ board. These can usually be found near any crafting area. So here in Daggerfall, it would be Tradesman's Square that has all of the crafting benches and such, with the exception of the alchemy and woodworking station. So you would come to these boards and you would pick up your writs. Now, in order to have the writs be available, you have to do preliminary quests. Those quests are given by an individual in the Mages Guild and an individual in the Fighters Guild. The Mages Guild has Denel Teleno here. He will have a quest for you. It'll basically give you a brief overview of the crafting systems, get you familiar with using the interfaces. It's a worthwhile quest to do. And then it will also allow you to pick up your consumable crafting writs. Moving over here, we have Melenith. Melenith will teach you your equipment crafting writs, so blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking. And it's a similar thing. She'll give you a quest. You'll have to go through the interface, maybe collect some raw materials, and craft some basic gear for her. And then she'll certify you and allow you to pick up your crafting writs. Crafting writs rotate on a cycle. so you don't always end up having to make the same gear or the same consumables. So in this case, I need to make a steel sword, cuirass, and greaves. It is worth noting, the type of writ that you pick up depends on your level in your solvent proficiency, metalworking, tailoring, potency improvement, recipe improvement, and woodworking. I recommend, until you have a large quantity of materials built up, that you don't rank up these passives, as it will cause your crafting writs to be much more difficult to complete. I'm hoping that I have enough material to make this sword, cuirass, and greaves in steel. Typically, I would want to be doing them in iron. Taking a more in-depth look at alchemy writs, here are the 4 potions that you may be asked to make. We have our Sip of Health, Sip of Stamina, Sip of Magicka, and Sip of Ravage Health. Below each are the combinations of reagents that can be used to make them. So for Sip of Health, you could combine any 2 of the following: Blue Antiloma, Bug Loss, Butterfly Wings, Columbine, Luminous Ursola, Mountain Flower, Water Hyacinth, with exceptions being Blue Antiloma and Bug Loss won't create a Sip of Health, nor will Luminous Ursola and Mountain Flower. Sip of Stamina, here are the 4 options. Sip of Magicka, 4 options. Sip of Ravage Health, there's 9 options in total. In combination with these recipes, there are, and these potions that will be required to be delivered, there's other items that will also need to be delivered. So you will need cornflower, natural water, blessed thistle, and wormwood. These will be asked for in quantities of 3 to be delivered alongside these potions. Talking about the enchanting writs, there's going to be 3 types of runes that are asked for: a glyph of health, glyph of stamina, and glyph of magicka. And then there's 3 delivered items that will be asked for as well. So Ta, Oko, or Jode. Taking a look at our provisioning writs. So provisioning writs are a little unique in that your character will have different provisioning writs depending on the faction that they are aligned with. So Aldmeri characters will need to provide 4-eyed grog, motts, red rye beer, baked potato, banana surprise, chicken breast. Daggerfall has a separate set of recipes that they will need to provide. And so it would be a good idea to check whichever faction your character is in, look at the provisioning ingredients that will be required, and make sure to be collecting those as you explore End Quest. From each of these writ recipes, I've created a writ shopping list. So these are all the raw materials that you will need to collect as you are questing or and now I'll pick up my consumable crafting writs. Now, displaying on your screen right now should be a overview of which potions you'll need to make for your level 1 crafting writs, as well as the items that you will need to turn in. This is to be used as a reference to give you an idea of what reagents, what solvents to be picking up when you're out and about. Maybe your inventory is filling up and you need to decide what reagents to keep or not keep. This is a good resource to know, oh, I'll need that resource in order to create my alchemy writ. Here, go to the bank to pick up my blessed thistle. And early on, it'll be those deliverable materials that essentially gate how many writs you can do. I should have grabbed an Oko essence here. Hold